Thank you very much. So we will continue with being recorded. Everybody continue, please, so that we can do that. Thank you very much for signing this up. Thank you very much for everybody who is joining us. Thank you. This is our last meeting in June, and we had a couple questions, and you saw at the end of the presentations, hopefully you've already read the slides and are prepared, because I know everybody did their homework, that we will have 2 meetings in July. If everything goes according to plan, then the CAC will be able to have, well, we will relax the schedule, I guess is what we're saying. I guess we're not officially dismissed, but close to it. Open for public comment in August and September, and then comes back, go before the PAB, and then goes before County Council. We really like to stress the public comment part of it. We don't want everything to go to be a rewrite come September. So there county, we've had a couple other meetings prior to this meeting on that, and they're working on that platform, and will get us as the guinea pigs for that platform when it's available, and then it'll go out for public comment. So I know Kate had some questions about the timing, and hopefully that's answered them. So any questions up front before we dive into it? Seeing no hands raised, we're diving into it. So, okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and he's going to go through the update, or I guess Patrick. I guess I just stole your thunder there. Sorry, Patrick. You were going to talk about update on the status of the planning process.
Yes.
Hold on, sorry. Before I turn it over to Patrick, I do want to give everyone an opportunity to talk to me via comment and email, because we really need to be a team for this, and we really need to all be online and cohesive when this plan is turned over. And I know that there's definitely some issues that we want to fine tune, but I want to make sure that we have a good feeling, and that not everybody's going to be happy about everything. I'm not. I can tell you that right now. It's not perfect, but we want to make sure that we've done the best that we can, and that we address any big issues before we wrap up in July. And someone just asked, the dates in July are the 1st and the 3rd Wednesday. So it is actually July 1st and July 15th. So please, you know, give me some feedback here. We want to make sure that we're ready to move forward. You can still comment, you can still make changes. We're not doing a rewrite, we're making changes. But we want to be comfortable with all the goals, the policies, and the strategies as we move forward. Big picture, big 30,000 foot. Okay, Patrick, sorry about that. Thank you.
So this is the agenda for tonight, and I think we can advance to the next slide.
Let's just remind folks that, you know, as you know from the agenda, we're going to focus tonight on primarily on that built environment set of goals, policies, and strategies. We've talked through these in previous meetings, and based on those meetings, and most recently the May 21 meeting, staff have gone back and made some revisions, which we sent to you a week ago, and hopefully you've all had a chance to review and look through. And so we'll share with you the results from the survey, what we got back from that, and then we'll do our small breakout groups again to discuss those in more detail. And then we'll also touch upon the healthy communities, goals, policies, and strategies as well tonight. So with that, Patrick, I'll hand you off to you.
Okay. So if you all have seen this this framework for the plan before, and as Mike just explained, tonight's focus, we're going to take a last look at the goals and policies and strategies that are under the built environment and healthy communities heading. So since the last meeting, we have been continuing to work to try to finalize all of the remaining pieces of Plan 2040, the implementation plan, and metrics, working through the components of developing a public-facing document. But in particular, a big focus of our time is what Elizabeth was talking about, trying to trying to pull together the land use map, and particularly the technical components of making that a public, user-friendly map that can go first to you all and be able to get comments from you all, allow you all to input comments in a way that works for you all and works for us to be able to pull those comments out and actually use them and process them. So as Elizabeth said, you all are going to be guinea pigs on that for us when we get that together, because we're going to then turn around and use it ultimately to present and go public with it and get public comments on that. So that has been some of our work behind the scenes up till now. But for tonight, we're focused on some tweaks to the built environment and healthy communities, goals, policies, and strategies.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick. So before we break into the small groups and let you guys have your in-depth conversations, I just wanted to take a moment and do some framing for that discussion. Remind you that the built environment, we focused a lot on land use. It's a fundamentally important piece of this. It's been where we've had a lot of discussion over the last couple of months. And the other components that are within this built environment element of the plan include housing, affordable housing, transportation, as well as the climate policies that we reviewed back in May. I think one of the interesting challenges of making a effective plan for Anne Arundel County is our diversity of land uses. That's why we selected this set of images, indicative of we've got such varied landscapes and communities across this wonderful county. And okay. As you helped us develop in the past, we have put together the land use policies map, development policy areas, to geographically identify some of these different landscapes. Of course, this doesn't capture all the variability, but gives us some big categories to think about. We've had a lot of discussion, of course, over decades in this county around preservation of the rural and agricultural areas. This iteration of the plan and your work has really contributed to elevating the concerns around peninsulas in particular, and the unique needs of those that are highlighted in a lot of these land use policies, as well as looking at our neighborhood preservation areas, and then what we're referring to as our targeted development and revitalization areas, the town centers, as well as our economic drivers like BWI Airport and Fort Meade, and our corridors, looking especially at, we have such issues around our big highways and development along those. I want to call those out as a special area. So with that as a guide, as you've seen, the land use policies that we proposed kind of focus on, I think, three big areas of, one, we're trying to limit development in those areas of the rural, neighborhood, and peninsulas. And then to make sure that we're planning for the growth that will happen in the county, looking at how we promote that into redevelopment. in those development and revitalization areas. And those take two very, fundamentally different mindsets and different policy frameworks from areas that we want to really limit growth, areas that we want to promote development. And then, an important thing that we've been focusing on a lot is places to improve the code, to make sure that as we put these aspirational statements into the plan, that we're also following that up through the legislative process to improve our county code, so that way we can reduce the need for modifications, that we have more clarity, and that the code is delivering or more clearly guiding development the way we want to see it. So to dive a little bit deeper into that, I just wanted to reflect for a minute about, relative to these different policy areas and the policy development area map and these different parts of the county. We've heard a lot about the need in this group, as well as out in the visiting and listening sessions and other community engagement we've had through the last 2 years of this process, the need to preserve ag and rural areas. So you see that reflected in the goals and policies to maintain that rural character there. And as we're updating the land use map, we're looking for opportunities of where can we decrease the planned land use intensity in those spaces. And that idea is reflected also in the neighborhood preservation areas of trying to put policies in place that are protective of the scale and character of development in those places, and limiting intensity. When we get to the peninsulas, again, the policies focused on where we can increase and prioritize environmental protection, being sensitive to the shorelines, areas protected by the state critical areas laws and our local critical areas protections, and really focusing on the importance of those infrastructure improvements. And these are things that, of course, are echoed in the small area plans, making sure that the Plan 2040 also highlights and prioritizes those.
I'm going to add, Elizabeth.
And as we are looking again at the planned land use map, looking for areas that we can decrease the intensity in those areas. Then for the redevelopment areas, thinking through, I think we had some nice discussions in our last couple of meetings about, trying to make sure that this plan is pushing towards redevelopment rather than new development, and looking at how we can shape our policy framework to promote that, to make that redevelopment the easier option. So those are the themes that we're trying to convey in this set of land use policies. We also, of course, have heard a lot, especially from the community in this group, about the need for infrastructure to meet the demands. There's ongoing work groups that are looking at the adequate public facilities ordinance and how to reform that. So that's mentioned in the land use policies as well as direction to prioritize the county's capital budget to make sure we're investing in those the public improvements to meet those growth demands. Also, we've heard a lot about promoting walkability and transportation options. So looking for how we can promote mix of uses and that kind of critical mass around transit facilities to make those viable. And of course, the need for capital investments to support that. And then finally, that making the code work better. We talked a lot in our May 21 meeting about some of the specific recommendations that are built into these built environment policies and strategies. And we talked a bit about, especially with Lori Rhodes commenting on the ongoing effort that the county is starting to spin up with looking at a comprehensive review of the zoning code and development regulations, articles 18 and 17 in our code, and identifying also any specific changes that might be beneficial to implement before that bigger picture review and change can happen. We'll have more discussion of that in our small groups. We have both Lori Rhodes and Lynn Miller with us today, and both of them are actively involved in the efforts right now happening within the Office of Planning and Zoning on that code revision, kind of setting the stage for what will be brought up to council for council discussion at a later date. So as we go into the small groups, they can answer questions that we have about that. So What's changed from last time we looked at these to now? Based on feedback from our conversations in May and previously, we try to go through the wording and be really careful about emphasizing what we want, to make sure that we're emphasizing quality of life, high quality development, emphasizing that the environmental regulations that we have in the county apply across all these areas. Though we talk about prioritizing the environmental protections around the peninsulas, that those environmental regulations still apply in our development and revitalization areas as well. So we added in some text to make sure that's clear for everyone. And then we had a lot of discussion in our last meetings about these terms about regulatory flexibility and incentives, and understanding that those can be words that set people off. They can be interpreted in different ways. So we tried to clean up the language around that, again, to be more clear. So tried to replace terms like regulatory flexibility with saying that we want standards that or the code to have clear intent and standards with opportunities for flexibility to promote high quality design. And when we use the term incentives, to make sure we put some language around that those incentives should be scaled and tied to promoting high quality development, community benefit. So hopefully those changes will address some of the concerns this group have, but we can dig into that deeper when we get into the small groups. Okay. So let me share with you the findings from the Surveymonkey results. We had 8 responses this time, a little bit lower than the last 2 surveys we did. Imagine there's a bit of fatigue in looking at all this information, but thank you to those who did fill this out. I think this gives us a nice sense about where the group generally stands in their initial responses to these changes. And again, as before, this graph shows, it lists on the left the different goals and policies, and you'll notice not every goal and policy is there, only the ones that we've made revisions since the last time you've seen it. And then the color coding there is we gave you the option of voting in the survey, whether you support the revisions to the language, you're neutral, you're okay with them, can live with them, or whether you have a strong concern that you would oppose them. So we start here at the top with the goal BE1. And this is the one that states that the goal is to align development regulations and review practices with Plan 2040, including the planned land use map, that recognizes the importance of the county's environmental features, limitations on infrastructure, and the desire to focus development and redevelopment in the targeted development and revitalization areas, enhance quality of life, and protect and enhance neighborhoods. That generally was well supported. We had one person oppose that and make a comment really focused on thinking critically about where the limits of those development areas are, and specifically commenting about whether there's too much of the west part of the county that's included in those targeted development revitalization areas. And that comment tracks through into the next couple of policies there, policy 1.1 and 1.2. 1.1 is about updating the county code to facilitate implementation of the planned land use map and the development policy areas. And 1.2 is focused on, just a moment, let me scroll to it, is focused on ensuring consistent implementation of the code to support the plan. So again, most folks supporting that with a critical perspective also provided. The next one that lists there is policy 1.4. And this one speaks to encouraging the use of unused or underutilized surplus county-owned properties to support environmental conservation and community benefits. And that was kind of a clarification of that one. It was a little more vaguely worded before, and we added that the intent of the reuse of those properties should be focused on environmental conservation and community benefit. Looks like that was broadly supported. There were no wording changes to goals and policies for goal 1, or sorry, goal 2 or goal 3. So the next one on the list there is goal 4. And this one focuses on the peninsulas. And 4.1 is to prioritize protection of sensitive environmental features on the county's peninsulas during the county's long-range planning efforts. And the change there was from, it was to add the word prioritize to make sure that we're emphasizing that. And again, that language seemed like it was acceptable to everyone. Okay. Then the next area was goal 5. And this one focuses on the targeted development and revitalization areas. And again, we say here that to focus and encourage carefully planned and high quality development and redevelopment in the targeted development and revitalization policy areas while maintaining environmental standards. And we made that addition to reference the environmental regulations there. That seemed to be generally supported. One person was asking you exactly what are those environmental standards, and there we're referring to the environmental protections in the county code that currently exist. And there's a lot more about those environmental regulations, of course, in the natural environment section of the plan. The next one, policy 5.1 there, is about aligning zoning and development regulations in those targeted development and revitalization areas to encourage private sector development and redevelopment that enhances the surrounding community character. And the next one, to ensure that adequate capacity exists prior to or concurrently with development through the adequate public facilities ordinance requirements and prioritizing necessary capital investments in infrastructure improvements to support development in the targeted development and revitalization areas. And we added there that specific reference to the adequate public facilities ordinance to make sure that we're clearly stating, that the private sector contribution to that this is not just wholly, public sector contribution. It looks like that was generally supported by folks. And again, a comment about, where those, the boundaries of those targeted development revitalization areas, specifically around West County, was kind of where the comments were on those policy, goal 5 and policy 5.1 and 5.2. When we get to goal 6, this one is focused on the critical economic development policy areas. So this is trying to put land use policies around those areas like Fort Meade, BWI, and up at the north end of the county, where we have strong industry and business space to be able to support that. The goal language was generally supported by folks. There was just some cleaning up of words there. But there were some questions around that policy 6.1 that we actually debated a bit in our last meeting as well, and staff tried to refine it, but I think we didn't quite hit it as well as we could. So this is something I'd encourage you to talk about in your small groups. The draft language says to ensure an adequate amount of land is appropriately zoned to meet the county's projected economic development needs. And there were some comments about the idea of what is the adequate amount of land, how are these needs projected, just some concerns kind of around the tone of that language. We have a similar policy that we talked about in the healthy economy section, where instead of using a word like ensure, we said retain the appropriately zoned land for economic development. We might want to try that word retain or another phrase similar to that for this. So I'd encourage this in small groups to talk about potential language refinements to make that more acceptable to folks. In 6.2 there, we have language about providing clear regulatory standards and process with flexibility to support high quality design and appropriately scaled development incentives to promote development around these major economic drivers. And that seemed to be generally supported by most folks. Okay, a couple more of these to walk through before I let you guys go into the small groups and talk amongst yourselves instead of listening to me. 7 is focused on the town centers. And the language there, we switched some terminology from talking about density to talking about more of the type of space we want to create. So instead of using the word density, we use promote vibrant and high quality development in town centers that provides opportunities to live, work, learn, and play. And that seemed to be well supported. I think that's an interesting contrast when we get down to goal 9 there at the bottom. It speaks to areas around transit stations. And there we did use the word density about encouraging dense mixed-use development and redevelopment around transit stations in policy 9.1. And a few of you commented about concerns about that use of the word density. So I think that'd be another good conversation to have in the small groups to think about, is there a different way that we can frame this? As planners, we use that word density all the time, and realize that it can be not sit well with the general public. So I'm totally open and inviting comments from you all to think of, like, is there a better way we can talk about what we want out of these transit centers if that term density is just lands poorly? Okay. So I think, oh, I've got a few more to look at, sorry. You guys did a lot of homework, I appreciate it. There's a lot of things coming together here. These in 12 jump to the goals around housing and affordable housing. And we had support to neutral across this. These were mainly some wordsmithing around brevity. There were a couple of interesting comments that folks pointed to around, there's language in there about supporting rental and home ownership, and a few folks commented on the importance of promoting home ownership over rental, and that's something maybe in the small groups we can talk to Aaron Karpowitz from Community Development Services around that idea, if that's something we want to try to carry further. But my understanding from the work that I've seen around affordable housing is, the folks who are working in that space want to promote both of those options. Obviously, home ownership is a wonderful thing if we can get people there, but not everyone is prepared and able to sustain that. And then the last one on 14. Just a moment as my computer scrolls to it. Sorry, slow connection. In 14 is where we talk about our historical and cultural resources. And we just had a slight word change there that, again, seemed generally supported by everybody. Just to change the word heighten awareness to increase awareness, just a word choice for what seems to be more common language.
Okay, thank you, Michael. We do have a couple questions I want to address before we break out, just because we're all together before we go quietly, before we separate. So first thing is, the question was about the land use applications and whether those land use applications were affected by COVID-19. They were not. The land use applications, the land use change applications were deadlined before all this happened. And so the question was, what is the plan now for all the requests for zoning changes? There's no difference in the plan. Office of Planning and Zoning is reviewing them. They will come to the CAC with Office of Planning and Zoning's recommendations, and they will become part of the plan. Whether they are adopted or not, then, that's a whole nother process. But Kate, everybody who applied has already applied. There's no change to that process. Does that answer your question? I hope. Amy, I'm not sure what you mean, what will then happen?
So the question, Elizabeth, is, I understand that, but we haven't gotten them. We have 2 more meetings. At what point is that going to happen?
As soon as Office of Planning and Zoning has finished with their review and recommendations, we don't know whether it'll be on the 1st or whether it will be on the 17th or whether it will be done via email. Am I right, Cindy? Or Mike?
So in the beginning, when Mike or maybe it was Patrick, going over our schedule. Our plan currently is that on July 1st, we'll go over sort of the big picture of how we've developed the land use map, which includes changes that we're recommending. Some of those changes would be support of some of the applications, and then just some consistency changes. And we'll go over what all that means. And then our hope, what we've been doing is trying to build a tool so that you all can review these, because we can't meet in public and show you maps like we would typically do. So we've been trying to build an online tool to do that. And my hope is that it will also be available around July 1st. And we give you a couple weeks to review and comment on the land use map itself, which includes all the recommended changes. And then we'll go over your comments in another meeting, and then before it goes out to the public.
And just to reiterate, that is for CAC use only. And then it'll go public. We're the guinea pig group. So there will be some tweaks that need to be made, but that is CAC use only.
So Elizabeth, does that mean we are for sure not going to need a meeting at the 29th of July? That's the 5th Wednesday in July?
No, as we before, please leave it. We don't plan on it, but we'd like to have it as an option in case we need it.
You still want us to hold it, in other words?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please. I have a feeling there'll be a lot of discussions on this, so we may need the 29th.
Yeah.
So, okay. And then there was one other comment that was done that was saying that we have to have density if transit is going to work. And I consider density to be a 4-letter word. And I think if you have multi-use and you have transit-oriented development, you automatically have what we, because we know what we're talking about as density, refer to. But I think when you get out to the general public and you talk about density, then they're not going to see that. They're going to think of single family. They're going to think of peninsulas. They're going to think critical area. They're not as educated and know what we're talking about when we talk about the different policy areas and the different categories. So I agree with you, but I still think that if you have those overlays, then you're automatically going to have multi-use and you're going to automatically have more transit usage, which is the result of increased density.
We can talk more about that in the small groups. We'd like to break the groups up, do a little bit of a twist what we've done the last times we'll have one group that's focused on the targeted development revitalization areas, and then one group that's focused on the rural, peninsula, and neighborhood preservation areas, so that we can dig deeper into the policies to those respective areas. We asked folks to vote on that on the survey, so we've got a few responses. But if I could ask folks to give me an indication of if you want to be in that first targeted development group, if I can get what would be easiest for me actually is if you could click on the on that participants icon at the bottom of your screen, and then that will give you a little raise hand option.
Your reactions do too.
Yeah, if you can give me that, then I can sort folks to make sure that, then this is for the folks who want to be in that targeted development areas. And then give me a moment to make the changes.
Michael, targeted development, you're talking about the transit development, town centers, et cetera?
Exactly. Yeah.
Versus peninsulas, neighborhood preservation, and I've forgotten the other. category.
Okay.
I'd say, this is Amy. I would like to be in that targeted development if possible.
Okay.
While Mike is working on that, maybe either Cindy or Mark, can you give the other option? Wasn't it neighborhood preservation, peninsulas, and something else?
Rural and agricultural.
Thank you. So those are your two choices.
Okay, but just hands up if you just want that first group, the town centers and revitalization areas. Okay, I think I've got everybody. If I put you in the wrong group, I apologize, and we can move you later after we get there.
It's a team effort.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, we'll go into the breakout groups now. And again, if you don't like the group you're in, let your if I made a mistake, let the facilitator know. The facilitator is going to be Patrick for the group focused on the town centers, economic development areas, and the transit-oriented development areas. And then Mark will facilitate the group with the rural peninsula and neighborhoods. And in these sessions, like we've done in the past, I think it's well worth our time, or best use of our time, to focus on those few goals and policies left that some folks had some concerns about. See if we can refine those and get to a place that we can build consensus on. And make sure we approach that with an open mindset of asking questions to understand what those concerns are, and then see if we can creatively think of ways that we can improve it to help get to things that people appreciate more. So we'll do this.
Mike,
yes?
can I, sorry.
Yes.
I have hands raised in multiple places, but I see that we're going to lose Erin in about 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should give her 5 minutes to talk about rental versus ownership, if that was one of the discussions that the small group was going to have, or do we think she can do that in the next 15 minutes in her group and make her presence useful? So she gets to express, you know, the knowledgeable aspect of that we don't maybe know.
Sure. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and give Erin the stage right now.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for letting me talk this for a couple minutes. Yeah, I think, you know, actually, Mike, you did a great job. I agree. It's not an either or, it's rental versus homeownership. We absolutely put a big emphasis on homeownership, and we run a program called the Homeownership Counseling Program that we really try to get first-time home buyers, many of whom are low income, ready to buy a house. We do credit counseling. We also offer some down payment and closing cost assistance. We have programs where we, you know, help, you know, do renovations to homes to make sure that they're, you know, sustainable and in good quality, so we can really ensure that we have sustainable home ownership in the county. We know that, you know, stable home ownership rates really make communities strong. At the same time, there's a huge need for affordable rental housing in the county. Not everybody is ready to buy a home, and I think we're going to see that more and more as we move through this current economic situation. And we saw this happen back in 2007, 2008, 2009, with the foreclosure crisis. Rents went up because there was such a high demand and people were losing their homes. So we recognize that there's an important piece. One thing that we're doing now is we're putting money into not just mortgage assistance to help people buy homes, but foreclosure prevention assistance so we can keep people from losing their homes. So that's a huge priority for the county. We're putting in some of our, you know, current coronavirus funding to do that. But prospectively looking forward, you know, one of the biggest things from a land use perspective is, you know, you got to if you're going to have enough affordable rental housing, you got to make sure you have land available to build multifamily housing, because affordable rental housing is multifamily housing, generally speaking, just because land costs are so high. So I think that continues to be a priority, at least for our office. And so we'll continue to talk about that.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Erin.
I apologize that I just have our local development council meeting. I'm going to try to sneak back into this meeting if that doesn't, if my agenda items don't go too long. Thank you for having me, though.
Thanks for making the time, Erin.
And she's always available by email. If you have any specific questions, you can certainly email her. She gave a presentation to us a while ago, and but I'm sure we can dig up an email. And if you have specific questions, we can get that back to you.
Yeah, and I want to thank you all for, you know, we actually, I think I've provided at least 2 other presentations in the last year, and we just actually got, County Council just approved our 5-year housing and community development plan, and I was able to, you know, share with, as part of our public engagement, that I talked to you guys, and so I appreciate your time again.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Let's go into the breakout rooms, and we can discuss these goals, policies, and strategies in more detail. Okay.
And don't forget, you have to have set to be in the breakout room, and then you'll get a warning about coming back together. And we need, once again, reporters to report back when we come back. And those who have done it before don't have to.
Okay. So, Patrick, can I ask you to let us know who is your spokesperson for your group?
Yeah, so Elizabeth is going to report out for the group, but the rest of the group will assist if there are other additional points that need to be brought out.
Thank you. So we spent a lot of time on 6.1, and that was talking about the critical economic development areas. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about 3. We're talking mostly about Fort Meade, BWI, and the northern border. And there were some questions about having capacity to support the, having land to support the economic, the critical economic development policy areas. And so we went through that, and we were talking about having enough land put aside for those areas. And what we came up with was really, and Melanie said it best, it's not about the land, about the acres and the number of lands, it's about the capacity of the land. And so we changed that, and we talked more about capacity and redevelopment in those areas, because we talked about mixed use. And when you have mixed use, and I've forgotten the number, you can help me out here, Holly. There was a further down in the discussion, a lot of people were opposed to the word dense. And I made that comment before. For some of us, density is a 4-letter word. And we assume that with mixed development and with targeted areas, you're obviously going to have more density. And you're going to have the condos, the mixed use, the stores, and you're going to go up, not necessarily go wide. And so that really applied to a lot of what we were discussing in built environment, is that we talked about having the adequate public facilities and the traffic, because obviously when you do mixed use, you're going to have more traffic, and the facilities and the roads and everything else. We talked about having transit, and right now we really only have 4 or 3 transit areas. And then we got on to, okay, well, if we redeveloped, and I think Lynn is with us, so maybe she can help us because we were looking for you. If we redevelop Glen Burnie, which is one of those areas that would be with mixed use and everything else, then we need transit. And how do we do transit? And would that involve the Cromwell station or what? But we really needed to focus on, and we limited those critical economic areas to just Fort Meade, BWI, and the northern border, and put that information back into the policy and the goals so that we were targeting just that and not other areas in the county. Did I get that about right, guys and girls? Any questions?
I have a question. Is how are you tying that into the timeline?
I'm sorry?
How do you tie those comments that you just reported back on to the timeline?
I'm sorry, can you expand my timeline of what?
Well, Planning and Zoning gave us some timelines, and one of the dates was 2035 when they said that their consultant told them that they would be out of land. So you have 20, well, what did you say is 22,000 homes for now in the next 10 years, and then another 10,000 homes or 20-some thousand homes from 2020 to 2030 to 2040. But you got that blimp right in there, 2035, where, you know, no one's wanted to talk about it, and it's a serious issue.
Well, I agree with you. It's a very serious issue, but also I think it has been the consensus of the CAC that we don't accept 28,000. The only way we're going to have 28,000 is if we change the zoning, and none of us want that growth. None of us wants to put, especially in single family, especially in the rural areas and everything else. And I was talking about this, and Lynn, you can help me. I think the number one thing that needs to come out of this GDP and the targeted areas and everything else is redevelopment. And we need to take out the word dense and just use new development, because if we have new development and if we use it in a good way with mixed use and targeted areas, the capacity will be going up rather than out. But even before we even do any of that, we need to focus on redevelopment. And we're not going to have 28,000. None of us think that that's viable.
Well, you had
in the current situation, especially in this current economic situation.
And they said it would be.
Well, they are consultants.
Okay, well, somebody paid them. And then what do you do? I mean, you know, this is really turning into a Plan 2030 plan, because we're not addressing all the things that were going to happen in the scope of a 2040 plan. If you're going to ignore 2035, then this is not a 2040 plan. It's a 2030 plan.
How are we ignoring 2035?
Who want to talk about it other than me?
Are you talking about capacity?
I'm talking about a consultant that was hired by Planning and Zoning, came back, and
we all saw the report. We know that. That was the report that there was going to be 28,000 new dwelling units by 2035.
No, that's not what it said. That's a projection.
That would
you gotta keep in mind that's a projection, guys.
Exactly.
It's just based on
the parameters that they were presented. That is what they projected, right, if things were continuing at that rate.
At that current time. Remember, this was in 2019, even 18. We got that report last year. Things have changed.
Right.
When the 28,000 dwelling units was presented initially to the CAC, the word that was used was demand. And we sat and wondered, how in the heck are you going to find a place? You can't project something you can't agree to. And what we're saying is we've never had that number changed. And as we're going through all of these reports, we're thinking, where are the 28K housing units? If the demand is still there, where are they going to go? Up or out?
Okay, drop the 28,000. We're not going down that road. Okay, just it went before and everything else, but we are not going down, and we are not looking for dwelling units for 28,000 in this current economic condition in this current county.
Well, we're talking about 2035 is what Gary's talking about. The future, not now. It takes time.
So the information that was given to that group to do studies with was probably gathered in 2017. They probably developed it in 2018, and we received it in 2019. So if all of those parameters and all the data that was used to put that proposal together, put that projection together, is based on facts that are 3, maybe 4 years old, which have no correlation to what is in existence now. And so that's where the 28,000 number came from.
No, not really.
Does anybody feel that in any sane world that is what we are looking at right now with the parameters that are going on in this world?
Well, you can't say that nothing's changed because of this pandemic.
I'm not talking about the pandemic.
Well, we're still growing. We're not growing. That's the point, is we've never had that number adjusted. We know we can. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Isn't that part of our task? To be saying what's viable and where we think the county should be going?
I hope so.
Yes. And all of the parameters that we have been working on, as well as the rules that have been put in place since Mr. Pittman has been elected, has curtailed and will further curtail those parameters based on that projection. And so what we are looking at and facing at is an unknown, but it is a whole lot less than 28,000 because of several reasons.
There's people on the committee that disagree with that. They quoted a higher percentage of growth.
But Gary, we've also as a group said less development, more redevelopment. We've talked about limitations, not expansion. And the plan is based on trying to accomplish that.
I think we don't know the results really of all of our discussions until we get into the nitty gritty of that land use map that staff is working on. I mean, that's where it all comes to a visual where the different land use speak to that, and then subsequently the zoning speak to that. But I want to point out that Elizabeth was reporting on Group 1's comments for BE 6.1, and that has to do with economic development, which is not housing. So maybe we should get back to that.
It could be mixed use because that's economic development too.
But Elizabeth pointed out the 3 areas that we were focused on. But we definitely in our group didn't have any discussion about the housing. So I don't see why we have to.
No, we
had a different emphasis.
We did not discuss especially single family housing because around those areas are mixed use. If we're going to work, we want to live close to where we work, and we want to be able to have less transit time, and we want to be able to go to the cleaners and the grocery store and the hospital and everything else all close to where we are.
So just to be clear, Elizabeth, that really is mixed use. It is housing also. It's combining all of it.
That's true. It is, right. But it is usually townhouses, single family houses, condos, apartments with town centers. I mean, you're looking at mixed use.
Here's another thought. Here's another thought that we really need to be aware of as well, due to specifically the COVID incident, is a lot of businesses and companies are realizing now that their physical footprint requirements are going to be greatly reduced because their productivity is just as viable in a remote environment, i.e. people working from home. So one of the things we have to consider and think about potentially is while the business footprint shrinks, the home use and traffic, vehicles, internet power usage from home units is going to go up. So we have to keep that in mind, as well as daycare issues, because even if you're working from home, you're not going to most of the time be taking care of your kids as well. So anyways, so your trips on the road go up, your power usage at home goes up, your water sewer usage, anyways.
True.
I digress.
True.
We need to refocus.
Anthony, while you have the microphone there, do you want to summarize what the other group spoke about?
Sure. Two things we primarily looked at was build environment number one, the goal. Looking for a little clarification on the limitations or the limitations of infrastructure and what that actually means. And we think that what that is referring to is the limitations imposed on build out or development and even redevelopment by infrastructure being power, water, sewer, anything that's tested, anything that will limit something being built, as well as being tested by APFOs. And we think that that's what that means. And I think we might need to put a footnote somewhere to clarify that or something. The second piece was policy build out 4.1, which dealt with the peninsulas. And one concern was the term used here for prioritizing environmental issues, which is the very first sentence. It says prioritize protection of sensitive environmental features on the county's peninsulas. And I think there was a concern on what was prioritized. And my takeaway from this is that we should be prioritizing protection of the sensitive environmental features over development, redevelopment type of activities in the peninsula overlays. That's part of the peninsula overlays. During our discussion, there was two primary kind of unspoken concerns, and I think that they're somewhat of a reoccurring issue. Is sometimes definitions, sometimes word choices. I'm sorry. Worrying about definitions of words choices is a bit of a concern without further clarification of what that means. In the other groups, the use of the term density, what does that actually mean to different people, right? It'll mean different things to different people, and that is a problem, is better defining those terms when it's viewed as a problem. And then the second one is worrying about accountability. Gary had a really good point. And I think some of us have also made this point in the past as well, is being accountable for the decisions being made over time. I think has been a problem in the past, and the concern is it will continue in the future without a level of oversight as well as documentation. And I did see that in and I can't remember where it was, but it was referring to doing review and oversight of decisions that are made in the way of waivers and such. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, very rich discussion. This is, dealing with this land use issues are the most complex things that we're doing in this plan. So while this conversation's been really wide ranging, I think it just, it's emblematic of how complex this work is and the diversity of opinions in this group. Does anyone have any other comments that they want to put out for tonight, knowing that we're going to talk more about land use in July when we actually have the land use maps to be able to look at? Anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak yet?
I think you can go on, Mike, to healthy economies.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll just briefly cover the healthy communities, acknowledge that we only have 15 minutes left. And that if you had a chance to look at the slide deck previously, the feedback on the survey was very positive. There were very minor changes that we made to that material, just some slight word choice issues. I'm trying to emphasize brevity, conciseness, as well as emphasizing concerns about social equity as we deliver our public programs. So the healthy communities is a wide-ranging element of the plan. It covers libraries, recreation and parks, and it deals with the food systems, Department of Aging and Disabilities. So it covers a lot of ground. But I think in general that this group has been pretty, been able to drive to consensus around those topics, and the programs of those departments is pretty clear too. So just overall, I won't even bother bringing up the slides because they're all pretty consistent of showing high ratings of support for these goals. But the ones that we did, just to note, have some modest changes were in the Healthy Communities Goal 1, it talks about community facilities meet the needs of all residents, and we just wanted to emphasize and underscore the all. You're hearing that theme throughout Pittman's administration, certainly, and throughout now in a much broader context of making sure that we're talking about equity and looking at, and we've been doing this in our schools and in our parks and other programs, looking at where we have inequality in public facilities and in delivery of public programs, and looking to make investments to reduce those inequalities in the county. So again, general support from the group for those changes. We also had goals in there around food access. This has been an emerging issue in land use in the last 10, 20 years as the term of, thinking about realizing that some areas don't have access to grocery stores with healthy foods, but some of these areas get dominated just by fast food and little corner stores where it's difficult to buy fresh, healthy foods. And there's been studies in Anne Arundel County indicating where those areas are. So there's a number of policies in there around supporting access to healthy foods in those areas where it's a concern, policies around use of public lands for things like community gardens. There was one policy in there just generally about supporting those programs that reduce food insecurity. So our food banks and other things. There's one interesting comment about just saying, is that appropriate to have in the GDP? Well, that's of course an important thing. Is that more of an operational question for that program versus a kind of land use oriented physical facility concern? So that's something we could think some more about. And then finally, we had recreation and parks. We had some modest adjustments in there. Again, speaking about access, and for park, that term access ends up having two different meanings. Parks has been going through American with Disabilities Act, ADA accessibility assessment, and making investments to increase that type of accessibility. They've also done analysis of equity, kind of physical geographic access. Where are there areas in the county where people lack proximity to recreation facilities, and what's the overlay of that with socioeconomic considerations? So I just wanted to clarify that because there was a question kind of about what was meant by access in one of those policies. So with that, very briefly, does anyone have any other questions or comments about those healthy communities goals and policies?
I have a question. Mike, can you clarify, because there was only one red, which was 7.2? Mm-hmm. Was that access?
That was the question about, is it appropriate to include that policy speaks to increasing resources to reduce food insecurity? Oh, okay. And so it kind of speaks to that, the budget and operations. We have tried throughout that section to try to separate out, the operations of one of our county programs, like say schools. We focus on the school facilities and that connection to development and land use versus talking about their education programs. So that's where I think that comment was coming from.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
I have a question about the parks, if that's okay.
Yes.
You're talking about, I assume you're talking about just the public county-owned parks.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And to my knowledge, they all have access in terms of ADA. It's been that way for many years. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out exactly what it is that we're looking at, because, purchasing land for parks is a huge deal. It's like the same thing with purchasing land to build a school is very expensive.
Right.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out where we're going with this.
Yeah, from my conversation with the folks at Rec and Parks, it's about the physical facilities, making sure they've got things like, are the door handles right? Are the bathroom stall widths correct? Those kind of, based on the facilities themselves, to make sure that they've done an assessment to see if there's ADA compliance issues with any of those facilities, and then to address them.
Okay, that's great. But I guess one of the things I thought we were all talking about too, or at least the impression I'm getting, is you're talking about access, just access to parks in the county, not necessarily once people get there, but, you know, having enough, I guess, adequate parks spread out throughout the county. Is that something also?
Yes. So it's addressing both those issues. When there's some, and we'll clarify this in the language, that there are some issues that are ADA access issues, and then some are that kind of proximity of making sure that there are standards that that the National Park Service and others have set up to say that, you know, you should have, you know, so many acres of park within such a distance from homes. And so they've done that kind of geographic analysis to see where there are gap areas in the county, and then are looking to prioritize the land acquisition to try to close those gaps.
I had a comment on that. If the one thing that I came to my mind was with the policies that I'm hearing here this evening of build up, increased density, but we don't call it that. What's been going on in the Jessup area is we have these apartments that are packed in. There's not even enough room at the ground level to put a grill. God forbid you want to have a swing set or a wading pool. So my feeling is, if we're going to allow and encourage and incentivize that type of development, we need to have recreational facilities very close by to these developments, because the properties that are being developed in Jessup, they have maybe a swing set or two for 290 homes. So, you know, to me, when you have a cluster, and basically, and we have a cluster, a real cluster of housing, that's where the parks and the recreational facilities should be, in places like I mean, right now, if you want to have a birthday party or a picnic or something, you can't have it at your house. You can't even invite your parents and grandparents over to your house because there's no parking. So when we put in these, you know, 290, 300, 400 people in a small area, we need to step up and provide some things other than PlayStations for the kids to do.
Yeah, those urban parks and those kind of recreation amenities around those higher density developments is really important. I can say someone who lived with 2 kids in a condo. Yeah.
Can I add to that also? I spent many years working for Recreation and Parks doing subdivision reviews, and this was back in the 90s, early 2000s. And there was a huge, not very interested movement to do away with any kind of land there's a required land amount. If you're going to build a subdivision, there is required in the code a certain amount of land set aside for recreation purposes. And for so many years that was wavered away. Modifications, they call it now, but back in my day, they were waivers. So within these communities that are being built, there should be a definite movement and focus on the Department of Planning and Zoning to provide those recreational, even if it's just land space, so that people can get out and kids can get out. And we're not talking about regional parks or anything like that. We're just talking about within communities that are being developed. If you look at some of the older communities in this area, they have huge, wonderful recreation areas that are well used. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Good.
Pat Lynch has something to say. I have a comment and a question. Under the policy HC 3.1, there is a word, there's a word, having been to the community college, which is one of the top rated community colleges in the country. I don't know why we use the word transform. It says transform college facilities and services to ensure that Anne Arundel Community College remains a premier learning. Why would you transform something that's already a premier organization in school? So what I my change recommended would be to maintain high quality college facilities and services that Arundel Community College to ensure that it remains a premier learning. Just get rid of the word transform. We don't want to transform. It's great and it's going to get better. And then my question is, we've already talked about this, and this is school utilization, which we're a little raw after the recent legislation that was passed in the council. But their OPZ continues, and I don't want to act like I know all their approvals, but there should be no permits for developers where the schools are closed. And when you look at, let's see, it's policy HC 2.1 number B, and it's continual to address utilization rates. And I don't know whether this is the appropriate place, but there's got to be somewhere, somehow, that we tell OPZ if they're going to approve permits to put in a big housing development, they got to look at the utilization rates for the schools before they approve the permits. And I don't know whether you all agree with me, but that just to me is logic. I don't know the code, the county code on that.
Hey, Pat, that deals with the school's APF. It's already tested. But the bigger issue that we have is we don't have a capacity issue in this county. Our problem in this county is
overall.
That's correct.
District by district, we do.
District by district, we do. Correct.
And even the schools, when they come out with their statistics, are not exactly up to date. So
well, remember, we pushed very hard and we got legislation through to have it done annually because it wasn't being done. And there is a school utilization committee looking at this right now, so we can leave it to them to address some of their needs unless Christina or Cindy have anything more to say on behalf of the administration, or OPZ, I should say. Nope. Okay. So they are looking into that, so that you know. And there are challenges, definitely are challenges, and we need to keep in touch with your council people to make sure that they make that utilization chart as current as possible. It's to be done every fall, and that was changed in the code.
Well, we have a big problem for what Sarah just pushed through with the administration, allowing
it's Gary, we can't go down that road. That was passed by the county council, and it will be something that we can amend, but that's.
I think the CAC should make good recommendations on what we believe is best for the county, and not be concerned about the people who are temporarily sitting on the council.
Well, some people don't agree, and we're not going to vote on that particular issue as the CAC.
I don't think that's responsible.
So, okay.
So Elizabeth, we're just about out of time, and
I
I think Cindy wanted to talk about our next steps too for
okay,
a minute.
Hold on 1 second. Before we do that, we need to have a motion to adopt the minutes of June 3rd.
I would, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Joel. And we have a second by Kate. For those of you who didn't see that.
No. I got something I want to talk about in the language.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Let me just make sure that other than, I'm going to go to Joel, then I'm going to go to Cindy, right? Okay, Joel, you have the floor.
Okay, and on page number 3, first paragraph, where it says the group agreed that pesticides should be prohibited. Can we add the word mostly? The group mostly agreed that pesticides?
You're talking about for the minute?
Yes.
Okay, so we need to go back, and then we need to make an amendment because technically those have passed. We'd like to amend it, and your recommendation is to say that most of the people or most pesticides?
The group mostly agreed. Put the word mostly in.
saying that you did not agree, in other words.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So the majority of the CAC agreed, yada, yada, yada. Does that work for you?
Yes.
Okay. So Joel, would you like to make a motion to accept the minutes as revised?
Yes, I would.
Second?
Second.
Okay. I'm going to still give it to Kate because she had her hand up. And so, Mark, is that okay? You got all that? Thumbs up from him? Okay. I appreciate that, Joel. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Cindy.
Okay. You want to share the screen?
Yeah, I can do that.
We all have anticipation about this.
Well, if it's taking too long, I'll just, it's talking about the next 2 meetings, correct? That's what you...
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
So your next meeting, July 1st, we will kind of give you this broad description of how we've developed the land use map so that when you are reviewing it, you'll have sort of a background to go by, as well as kind of finish up anything, any loose ends. Like if you remember when you were reviewing some of the summaries of each of the chapters, you had some comments about your vision themes. So we can go back to those and like confirm those if there's some things. I know like we saw, you don't really discuss economic development in your vision themes. You might want to add something, and you had a few tweaks, so we can go back to those. And any other thing that I think are loose ends. And then hopefully the tool that we've been putting together will be available by July 1st so that you can then leave that meeting and start reviewing the land use map. As I said, the land use map is not just the land use change applications, but staff recommendations as well on land use changes that kind of really drive into these development policy areas and the goals and policies that have been developed over the last 8-9 months. And then on July 15th, the plan would be then to go over your comments on the land use map. And then kind of wrap it up from there. And then from there on, from that, we would have a public open house late August. Well, actually, they would go into reviewing the land use map late July, early August, and then we would have a draft of the plan document for review for the public. So that would be the whole document, not just the land use map to review. And that's, we've been working on that too, a layout. As we said before, would be 2 volumes, an action plan, and then the other volume that would be larger, sort of the summary of the plan, supporting the goals and policies, actions, implementation plan. And then planning board in October, and then introduction to county council in November. So that's where we stand now with our timeline.
So Cindy, can you just clarify that for the majority of the group, the 1st and the 17th, with the last meeting of the last Wednesday in July is the save date, but then after that, we are...
Yeah, I'd like to build in a date and, you know, without, I have to go back and look, but but at the next meeting, we'll like throw out another date maybe that we can use to kind of put closure to the CAC group and let you review the full document prior to it being released to the public.
Okay, so I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on that, so that you knew. You're welcome to come with me to all the district meetings and to go before the Planning Advisory Board as well and everything else. I'd love to have support. Or I support them. So, but anyway, okay, so you guys have an idea of the timeline going forward. Any questions?
I have a question. I was wondering if Cindy, whether it'd be possible to build a directory structure on the shared drive that has the different sections of the documents and the chapters that go into those, so that we have one place we can go and kind of see everything as it will be in the final 2 volumes.
Do you want to comment on that? I'm pretty sure we've already set up a structure of what's been reviewed now, and then prior, as we get, we're starting to put all of that into a final format, which we haven't shared with you because it's not finalized yet. But once it is, we would send that to you to review.
I mean, right now, stuff seems to be like in the meeting materials and this and that. What I'm saying is start to pull together a directory that has all the chapters and sections with their revision level, so that we can see what you're working on, or what's the latest draft that we should be looking at.
Okay, we can look at a different structure that might be more meaningful for you.
I think wouldn't it just be, it would be a folder, and then within that folder would be the chapters.
A folder that's then has one of the early PowerPoints that showed the structure, and basically use the built environment, and then under built you had goals, blah blah blah, and basically have a directory tree like that, right off of that slide that you all presented at the beginning of the meeting. Turn that into a directory tree.
This is Amy. Can we I believe we can just download that on our computers and make our own folders.
Well, we can
That's what I've been doing.
We could do that. Just be
That's
nice.
what I've been doing.
It'd be nice to have an official location where everything is kept updated.
Okay, the administrator, I'm sorry, I keep saying that. The OPZ will work on that and get back to us when they figure out how they're going to present it and put it all together and get it to us. So remember, all this, we're not going public with this. This is CAC use only for the time being. So, okay, any other comments, questions from staff? Anything else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion. So moved.
Melanie, second. I see Anthony put his fingers up. So, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. We appreciate it. We'll see you on July 1st. Don't forget to do your homework.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.